of a lot of allegations in those. Iran is capitulating. The outcome of what he was mentioning in those tweets is a total capitulation of Iran. And today we've learned that the strait is somehow closed, and or Iran is controlling the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Somehow it's limited. What is the current situation?
Well, you're right. We had an agreement with the Americans, a comprehensive ceasefire, 10, 11 days ago? What was it? And then the Netanyahu, if you recall, he carried out those carpet bombings on cities and slaughtering hundreds of people, even in neighborhoods that are not friendly to the resistance. He just, mass slaughter. And of course, Western media try to portray it as targeting as Hezbollah strongholds and Hezbollah targets. I actually spoke to two Western journalists in Beirut. They wanted like a sound bite from me, or a sentence or two. I don't know if it's called a sound bite, but a sentence or two from me for their reports. Why do you write stronghold? Or Hezbollah stronghold, or Hezbollah targets. These are all civilian targets, and both of them more or less said the same thing, that we didn't do this, our editors did them. I said, doesn't make a difference. Your name is on it, and you are, through your silence and your acceptance of this, you're complicit in these genocidal attacks. So Western media in Beirut and journalists are collaborating with it. We're collaborating with the Israeli regime. But the point is that Netanyahu violated the ceasefire. He wanted to wreck the ceasefire. So it's obvious from everyone across the world has to keep this in mind, that this war was started by the Israeli regime and the Trump regime, and the economic calamity that is heading our way is because of them. And so finally, 10, 11 days ago, whatever it was, we had an agreement. Lebanon was a part of it so that the slaughter would stop. And then Iran was to open the Strait of Hormuz. Netanyahu violated the agreement, so Iran didn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Also, when we went to Islamabad, it was clear that Vance did not have the authority to negotiate because he kept making phone calls. The Iranians had the authority, and it was Netanyahu who said Vance should the U.S. president reported to this tiny colony in Palestine, and he has said other American leaders report to him every day. So anyway, you think that would be a scandal, but so he didn't have the authority, and ultimately the United States didn't make any real progress with Iran at the negotiating table because the Israelis again didn't want this. So the continued crisis, the growing energy crisis that has continued over the last 10, 11 days is again because of Netanyahu. It is again because of the Zionists. We could have had an easing of the economic crisis by opening the Strait of Hormuz, but he violated the deal and he prevented the talks and in Islamabad from making progress. Then Iran, after the ceasefire, because Iran kept putting pressure on the Americans and kept the Strait of Hormuz closed in order to put pressure on the Americans to end this bloodshed in Lebanon. And 3 nights ago, I think it was supposed to happen. Netanyahu didn't do it. The next day, Iran made additional threats, including striking Israel or Israeli regime targets, possibly in Lebanon. I'm not quite sure. But that, I think, tilted the balance along with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. And the regime accepted the ceasefire. Of course, it's violating it, but it accepted the ceasefire more or less. So Iran, yesterday, said that it will open the strait in accordance with the agreement with the United States last, 10, 11 days ago. But then right after Iran opened the strait, Trump said the siege on Iranian ports will remain in place. He imposed the siege because Iran, due to the violation of his ceasefire in Lebanon, they kept the strait closed, and then he imposed the siege. So because of Lebanon, the United States put a siege on Iran. And Vance apparently said, why is Iran so obsessed about Lebanon? I didn't see it myself, but someone else told me, as if, killing the Lebanese is not important. But Iran said, no, we'll be steadfast. So the Americans imposed a siege on Iran. And then when Iran opened the strait, Trump said, we're going to keep the siege on Iranian ports. Immediately, the Iranians went and said, if that's the case, then the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. So Trump and Netanyahu started this global crisis. It is getting worse by the minute, literally by the minute, Nima. And reports say that within 1 to 2 weeks, experts are saying between 1 and 2 weeks, the situation is going to get very bad. And within 3 to 4 weeks, the global economy is going to head towards collapse. So this is where we are right now, thanks to these monsters. So the Iranians are, if the Americans right now decide to lift the siege on Iranian ports, and that means preventing food from getting in, preventing medicine from getting in. That's basically what it means. If they lift the siege, then the Strait of Hormuz will be open. So it's really up to the Americans whether there's going to be extra fuel, extra helium, extra oil, extra fertilizer on the global market, because right now there are huge numbers of ships in the Persian Gulf waiting for the green light to move.
Yeah. Professor Marandi, here is moments ago what Donald Trump said. He says that we have very good conversations going on with Iran and it's working out very well. But from what we've learned from the latest announcement, which was moment ago from the Supreme National Security Council, they said the basic is that the first point is that on the 10th day of the war, the United States started sending messages to Iranian. What is the process of negotiation or the talks or the messages that Donald Trump is somehow feeling that is going well?
Well, I think you know the answer to this, that nothing that Trump says you can take too seriously. Although, or seriously at all. Although I have a feeling, and I may be wrong, and I said this yesterday in a couple of places, and I also tweeted it, that maybe Trump is claiming that Iran has made all these concessions. It won't fund Hamas. It won't fund Hezbollah. It will, I don't know, give up its nuclear program. All those tweets that you were talking about earlier yesterday, all the nonsense that he said. Maybe he is saying all this so that later on he can say Iran made all these promises, but it did not carry out it did not fulfill those promises, so I have to attack Iran. That, I think, is because usually I ignore Trump. I don't read his stuff. I don't listen to his speeches. I've given up on that a long time ago because I learned nothing of it. Everything he says can be negated within an hour, after the subsequent paragraph, within a day. He flip flops. He changes. He lies a lot. So I usually ignore him. But yesterday, this sudden, these social media posts of his, one after another, I thought to myself that perhaps he's making these fake claims in order to be able to justify another attack later on, to say that, well, Iran agreed to all these things, but they didn't do it, so they were lying, and now I have to bomb them. That's, I think, a plausible interpretation. I'm not saying that's the right interpretation. It could just be a continuation of all the nonsense that he says. like you were just now saying, he's saying things are going well. I don't know. I can't really comment on Trump, but what I can say is that Nima, the whole war, sorry, the whole founded on a major calculation. The war was based on major to me.
I've
Okay.
lost your voice. Yeah,
Is it okay now?
you're back. Yeah, you said the whole world. What was that? And
I said what? Sorry. Where was I cut off?
yeah, the whole war. From the whole war.
Yes, I think the whole war, not just this, the Ramadan war or the 40-day war, but also the 12-day war, both were based upon miscalculations. The Americans thought, maybe through the lies provided to Trump by Israeli intelligence or by their own foolishness, the Americans thought that Iran would collapse. I'm sure you recall at the beginning of the 12-day war, or near the beginning, Trump said unconditional surrender. And then at the beginning of this war too, it was all about unconditional surrender. And then after a couple of days, when they saw that despite the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei and some of the senior commanders, the Iranian armed forces were functioning very well, and the people were on the streets, and there was no rush on banks or supermarkets or gas stations or anything like that. So for a few days, they kept saying Iran is running out of missiles. We've destroyed all their missile bases, their drone bases, and then they saw that no, this propaganda is not working. And after Iran continued to fire missiles and drones, and they gradually increased. So the Americans changed their position from unconditional surrender to providing this 15-point plan that Iran rejected. And then Iran gave its own 10-point plan, which Trump accepted. He accepted the 10-point plan to be the framework of the negotiations. That's why Iran accepted the ceasefire. And that was a huge victory. But of course, now Trump is, as the statement put out today by the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, Trump is trying not to is trying to impose other conditions that have nothing to do with the 10-point plan. So, but in any case, what I mean is that what I'm trying to say is that at the beginning of the war, the Americans said unconditional surrender. But after 10 days, it became clear to them that we're not going to lose this war. And even though they carried out more atrocities and they started targeting critical infrastructure, they failed. And so ultimately, they had to stop. And now we are where we are. But I think that we're heading for a war again. Now, I'm not sure. And some of my American friends say that Trump just wants out, perhaps. But I think that the chances for war are very high. And if there is war, it shouldn't take too long for it to start, because the Persian Gulf is going to get very warm. You live in the south of Iran. Your family is from the south. You know what I'm talking about better than I. During the Iran-Iraq War, I was in Khuzestan, the south, during summer, and it was very, very difficult, and during the day, almost impossible. So I think it's going to get warm. I think the Americans, if they want to launch an attack, they have to do it sooner rather than later. But the problem is that if the Americans launch an attack, they're going to target Iran's critical infrastructure again, like they did before. This time round, if Iran starts targeting, let's say, electricity in these regimes in the Persian Gulf, out of retaliation, because part of and they are guilty, in the heat of in the summer, that will force everyone to leave. Millions of people will leave the Qatar and the Emirates and Kuwait and so on. Millions, literally overnight. They will not be able to stay because the heat will be intolerable, especially for these wealthy people who've been living off of oil and gas for decades. They won't be able to continue living there. So you'll see millions of people leaving literally overnight, and these regimes will collapse. So I think that to restart the war would be a catastrophic mistake for Trump, for the U.S. empire. I think it would probably bring an end to these regimes in the Persian Gulf, and it would definitely it would bring about that global economic collapse that we've been talking about, because we're heading in that direction. And the last 10, 11 days since the ceasefire, it's only been getting worse. Every day it's getting worse. And we're reaching closer and closer. We're getting closer and closer to the tipping point. As I said, 1 to 2 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. This is how they are interpreting how the future of the global economy will move. So we'll have to see. Again, there are differing views, but I think that not my understanding. I know that the Iranian armed forces have been preparing themselves 24 hours a day, and that just like after the 12-day war, they began preparing themselves for a bigger war, and this time they are preparing themselves for the next round.
From the announcement of this National Security Council, one of the points that is mentioned in the talks, it says new proposals have been raised by the Americans, which the Islamic Republic of Iran is considering and has not yet responded to. Professor Marandi, what was the fair, in order to talk with the American part, you have to understand, are they really prepared to talk, or they do want to somehow continue with this sort of because you don't see any sort of deep understanding of the root causes of what's going on. They want to put something, superficially. They want to solve the problem that is on the surface, not going below the surface, not those deep causes of the conflict. Do you see any sort of understanding in the American part to being willing to go in that direction?
Well, I'm not privy to what is going on right now. I don't know what the new American proposals are. The Pakistani delegation that left, I think, last night, they were here for 2-3 days in order to see what can be done. So right now, I'm not in a position to give a definitive response to your question. But what I can say is that is the nature of empire. The empire, it's like Zionists, they consider themselves Zionists or worse, but the empire considers itself to be exceptional. And so it has exceptional rights, it has exceptional privileges, and therefore for anyone to demand justice, for them, that's all outrageous. The 10-point Iranian plan, which people should take a look at, there's nothing extraordinary in it. It's a very normal 10-point plan, but the Americans don't want to take it seriously because for them, Iran as an equal doesn't make sense. When we went to Pakistan, while we were there, the Washington Post put out a opinion piece, and the Washington Post is very close to the CIA, that they should kill the negotiators. And so when we were coming back, we thought that there was a good chance that they would shoot down our plane, the Americans or the Israelis. This is the sort of regime, this is the sort of mentality that we're dealing with, where the media competes with the regime in promoting crimes against humanity and war crimes. So to get justice from the United States, is you have to be firm and steadfast. We've seen how the Americans have been bullying countries across the world over tariffs, and the only country that really stood up to the United States was China because of its power and strength. So I'm not very optimistic, but Nima, again, going back to the war, I think the Americans obviously have been preparing themselves for another round of war. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's a good possibility. The Americans and the Israelis have been preparing themselves. The Iranians are preparing themselves. So it could be that this period, they've been buying time. But this, I think, is a miscalculation, again, for maybe 4 reasons. One is that Iran is also preparing itself. It's not as if the Iranian armed forces and the government are on vacation. So they are swiftly preparing themselves for the next phase. The second issue is that this ceasefire period, because of their own actions, because of refraining from carrying out the ceasefire in Lebanon, and now imposing a blockade on Iranian ports, they have caused the Strait of Hormuz to remain more or less closed. So the global economic crisis is intensifying. It's now it's even worse. This is the pay, because now even Iranian ships are not going through. There's I've heard different stories about how many Iranian ships are getting through or not. It's not clear to me what exactly is happening, if some ships are getting through or not. I've heard different stories. I don't know what's true. I'll try to figure that out later on. But in any case, it is getting worse than before. The pace, the movement towards the catastrophe, the global economic catastrophe, is speeding up. So this buying time is pushing the world and the United States, of course, towards a major crisis. And then the other issue is the third issue is that, as I said earlier, we're heading towards the warmer season. It's going to get very hot in the south in a month, and then it will just become intolerable. So even if the Americans, and I think the Iranians will probably allow them to take some territory and then deal with them in the counterstrikes. So they'll let them, let's say, occupy some areas or maybe islands, and then they'll start hitting them with missiles and drones and harassing them day and night and taking casualties as the weather gets warm and hot and intolerable, which will be terrible for their morale. So I think that these 3 reasons, and then a fourth is that the world is getting sick and tired of the United States and the Israeli regime. And starting another war is going to cause greater anger, especially as we are getting very close to the economic crisis exploding. So I don't think what the United States is doing is smart at all. I think it is an act of desperation. But again, some people believe that the United States is not going to do this. But in the Supreme National Security Council statement that you alluded to, that just came out right before the show, it also says that Iran is going to take fees from the ships. So, and that they will remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz. This, I think, is a key turning point. This was the catastrophic mistake of the United States in this war and the Zionist regime, because Iran had no ambition to take the Strait of Hormuz. We know that. And it was business as usual, even during sanctions. But now, under these circumstances, the Iranians have decided to take the strait, and they're not going to give it back. And this changes the balance of power in this region permanently and in the world. So regardless of what the Americans do, the Iranians are not going to give up the Strait of Hormuz, ever. And these dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, these family dictatorships, are going to have to deal with a new reality. And so I think that it's fair to say that the forces of empire across the region will be weakened, and the axis of resistance across the board as a result, will be strengthened. And even if there's another war, I think that will not change anything. It will probably make it worse for the United States, because when they are defeated, and I'm sure when they if and when they start the war, that they will say, the Western media, even those who are opposed to Trump, will talk about their victories and how they've taken the islands and how heroic the U.S. soldiers are. But that propaganda will last a few days, just like the 12-day war and just like the Ramadan war or the 40-day war. After a few days, it becomes clear that this is not going to go well. This is not going to end well for the United States and many in Iran. And we discussed this from the beginning of the war together. Many in Iran want this war to continue, not because they like war. No one likes war, but they're saying that we have to engage in combat with the Americans, with the Trump troops, in order that the United States in future never again thinks about attacking Iran.
Yeah. And actually, we had the vice president of Iran talking about this, that if we cannot achieve it with the negotiations, we're going to definitely achieve it on the battlefield. This is what really happening. And Professor Marandi, we know that.
And just one thing, Nima, the vice president of Iran, he was the vice president. He was very close to former President Khatami.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a broad political spectrum in Iran, all saying that enough is enough. We're going to remain steadfast. So for Trump or anyone in the West to hope that he can divide the president, or that there's some sort of division between, and you see that online too, unfortunately, that there's like this division between the foreign ministry or the president and the armed forces. That's nonsense. Everyone knows that everyone knows that the only way forward right now is for Iran to be steadfast, and everyone knows that Trump is dishonest, and that the United States does not abide by commitments. So the first vice president, when he says that, he sounds exactly like a military commander, and I think this is something that people should take note of.
You mentioned the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of whoever follows the Persian media, the Iranian media, domestic media, understand what is the tone. And as we've mentioned, Professor Marandi just mentioned, and they say that it's going to remain under the control of Iranian government. But when it comes to the nuclear program of Iran, we had Donald Trump yesterday arguing that Iran is going to give up the enriched uranium. They're going to sending that to us. And what was that?
Who knows? What Trump was saying yesterday, Dr. Ghalibaf said that Trump said 7 things, all of them were false. And so again, the only way that I can interpret what he said yesterday to make sense is that he's making all these outrageous claims, these ridiculous claims, so that later on he can say the Iranians promised all these things, but they didn't fulfill their promises, which would be a lie. I mean, the Iranians obviously have not promised anything. But if he wants to go to war, then he would say, they told me they do these things, they didn't do them, so I have to bomb them. If I can read, that interpretation does make sense. But then again, Trump has said so much nonsense over the years and over the past few months, and especially with regards to Iran, that this is just one interpretation. The second interpretation would be that's the normal, abnormal Donald Trump.
What is the communications, Professor Marandi? We had the phone call between Iranian foreign minister and his counterpart in Saudi Arabia. And is there any sort of other connections or talks between Iran and GCC countries, warning them? Because as you mentioned, the war is coming somehow. Many people are expecting that in Iran, at least basically Persian media is talking about the war is coming and everybody is getting prepared in Iran. But what is the level of communication between Iran and GCC countries which they would be part of the war if the war reopens again?
Well, obviously, Oman has taken one approach, and Qatar, after Iran retaliated and hit them very hard, their gas installations, they shifted and became more, let's say, they took a more reasonable stance.
Or cautious?
Yes, and also more reasonable, not out of any, out of like, not because they're sincere, but because they saw that Iran is powerful and the United States cannot defeat Iran. Actually, Nima, I've been speaking to, I don't want to go into detail, but I've been speaking to diplomats, to scholars from different countries, and they all of those who I've spoken to say that their governments and their political all shocked. I'm using the word shock myself, but basically that's what they all imply as to how effective and how powerful the Iranian nation is, and how the Iranian people remain steadfast, and how the armed forces function, and how Iran's allies were all well coordinated with each other. They're all stunned. Important countries, and so that is something that to take note of. But with regards to Saudi Arabia, I don't know. I don't know what was behind what goes on behind the scenes and what was said between the two sides. But the country that is right now pushing for war is the Emirates, which makes sense because they are the closest to the Israeli regime, and so they're pushing for further war, which is foolish because this time around Iran will probably finish them off first. But I'm not quite sure where Saudi Arabia stands right now. If we look at Western media, initially they were saying that the Saudis, and not just initially, for quite a while, they were saying that the Saudis support the assault on Iran, and of course the Saudis gave a lot of help in the war effort, and they funded it. I think we discussed this before. The Emiratis, the Saudis, and Qatar all fund the war effort, the U.S. armed forces, all three. Qatar less so, they apparently for technical reasons. I'm not sure about Bahrain. I haven't heard anything about Kuwait. But in any case, the Saudis have been. But then more recently, we've been hearing again, and this is. I'm not saying this is absolutely true, but the Saudis now don't want this to continue. I don't know, but I think it would seem reasonable because they have lost a lot. Every day that goes by, these Arab regimes are hurting. True that the Saudis are exporting maybe 4 million barrels a day on average from the Red Sea, but a lot of damage has been caused. The price of oil has gone up, but a lot of their petrochemical plants are on this side. Their exports are lower. A lot of their plants have been damaged. So most of their petrochemical plants and most of their industry that's linked to the oil industry are near the Persian Gulf. Some are alongside the Red Sea, but most are here. So the Saudis have they're hurting. There's no doubt, and their ordinary trade, most of it goes from the Persian Gulf, and then there's the other countries. So every day that goes by, things become more difficult for them. It would make sense for them to want to end this, but I just think that the chances for war are quite high. The Israelis want it. Netanyahu wants it. The Zionists in Washington want it. Just like Joe Kent said at the beginning when he resigned, that this war is not about the United States. Iran is no threat. This war is not about nuclear weapons. Iran is not producing them. This is about Zionism and the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime. And I think right now, if the war starts again, that is going to be the reason why we'll have war.
Do you expect a new round of negotiations anytime soon?
I'll be very open about this, as I always am. I was just informed a couple of days before, maybe 2 or 3 days, I'm not sure, before the previous round. I was asked if I'd go, and I said I prefer not to, because I think I'll be hours on going to Pakistan, and it'll take hours to come back. And during that time, I can do work online, because I've basically given up my students are probably, they probably are going to hate me because I've become a horrible professor. But I'm just focusing on war and all that. I'm horrible. I apologize to all of them. I've become terrible. But I said that I prefer to be here, because I'd be wasting a lot of time on the flight, because the flights don't have internet connection. And but I said, if you want me to go, I'll go. And so literally, like, they called me, I don't know what time it was, maybe at 2 in the afternoon, said, be at the airport in 1 hour. And you know that Imam Khomeini Airport is outside of Tehran. Mm. So I said, I can't be there in an hour. And they said, well, try to get there as fast as possible. So I got ready and went, and I got there in 2 hours. So I am not privy, I'm not like with the negotiators or anything. I spoke to people at the airport, on the plane, when we got there. I don't know details. I don't know if they're going again. No one has contacted me. So I would assume that nothing is happening right now. But then again, maybe if at some point this time around, they won't ask me to go. But my understanding is that so far, no decision has been made. And that the Supreme National Security Council statement also basically is saying that a decision has not been made. So it's unclear if there will be a second round.
The other important point in the announcement of this statement of Supreme National Security Council was the case of war being ended on all fronts, which we know what Iran did with the case of Lebanon. They tried to put a lot of pressure on the United States, then forcing Netanyahu and his administration to do something about the ceasefire. And what was when you look at the statement of the Prime Minister of Lebanon, he's not mentioning Iran. He's thanking Saudi Arabia. I don't know other countries about what has happened, but the ceasefire was because of the pressure, Iranian pressure on the United States. Wasn't that the case?
Of course, he knows that. Everyone knows that. Only an insane person would think otherwise. By the way, when Iran says all fronts, it's not just Lebanon. It means Gaza. It means the whole of West Asia. But the reason why Lebanon was mentioned was because of the onslaught that was taking place against the Lebanese people, the mass slaughter. Well over 2,000 people were slaughtered. Well over 2,000 people were slaughtered in that period of time. So, and during this genocidal onslaught. Yes, of course, the Lebanese the Lebanese prime minister has Lebanese blood on his hand, because this ceasefire was about to be enforced. And then he conspired with Netanyahu and the president of Lebanon as well. They conspired with the Israeli regime and Trump to say, no, we're not a part of this ceasefire. So they could have had a ceasefire without any political price, without having to pay any without giving concessions to anyone, because the Iranians were doing it for them. They could have just sat back and waited, and then received this, and then had the ceasefire, and then they could have done whatever it is they want to do. But they had to help Netanyahu and Trump wreck the ceasefire and say, no, we're a part of a different track. So they wanted the Israelis to bomb Lebanon. They wanted the Israelis to bomb people in the south and elsewhere, so as to weaken the resistance and the supporters of the resistance. So they wanted women and children to be slaughtered. And history will remember this. This is a very, very dark moment in Lebanese history. And when time goes by, the children of people from across Lebanon, when the emotions are disappear, go away, and people look at back objectively, except for those who are agents of the West and who are on the payroll, which are quite a few in number in Lebanon. But except for them, everyone will remember this dark, dark moment in Lebanese history, and the prime minister and the president will be remembered for that. But yes, the only reason why Netanyahu stopped was because he was forced to stop. And the reason why he was forced to stop, true, I think that the Iranian threat to strike the Israelis tipped the balance. But the real reason, in my opinion, was the fact that the Strait of Hormuz continued to be blocked. And this is, I think, the Iranian strategy, to push the United States so hard economically that they reach a point where instead of being Israeli firsters, the White House and the political elites start thinking like ordinary Americans. We have to have our interests first. And whenever they're forced to impose their interests first, that is the beginning of the solution in our region. So I think that Trump forced Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire. Netanyahu resisted. Iran added an extra threat, but in reality, but the major reason was the resistance, of course, and the steadfastness of the supporters of the resistance in Lebanon. They're the number one reason for the regime being forced to accept the ceasefire. That is the number one reason. Their heroism. They're shining stars of humanity. And we have to remember they've made all these sacrifices because they were drawing off the Zionist army from the genocide in Gaza. They're sacrificing their own people to spare the people, to help save another people. But that first and foremost, after that, it was the pressure, the economic pressure that's, as we speak, continues to build. And here is where I think that Zionism is in trouble. Because not only is Zionism now despised across the world as a master, people see it for what it is, as a master race, a chosen people that slaughters day and night, that snipes kids. Even now they snipe little girls just, in Gaza, and they bomb families in Lebanon. They just, during the last few seconds before the ceasefire, they bombed an apartment block, slaughtering everyone inside. They bombed medics. They killed large numbers of medics. I mean, the stories coming out of Lebanon just show what monsters these Zionists are. But the world has turned against them. The American people are turning against them. But now the American elites have to start thinking, do we want to destroy our economy, to wreck the global economy, to go into an economic depression because of these, the Zionists? This is where I think, and I may be wrong, but this is what I think caused Trump to force Netanyahu, or the United States, maybe not Trump personally, but the political elites in the United States forced Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire, because the American elites in Washington are finally saying, this is getting dangerous for us now. The fuel shortages, the fertilizer shortages, the helium shortages, these are now going to put a lot of pressure on our economy at a time when, and our so-called allies, proxies, or I can think of worse words, but I won't use them. But our economy, the U.S. economy, is already in pretty bad shape, and then things are getting worse. So I think that one can say that the United States was finally, for a second there, looking at the situation from an American first perspective, not because that's in the nature of the political elites, but because things are getting very dangerous. I really think that people do not appreciate how bad the situation is about to become. the global economic situation is on the verge of catastrophe. And as I said, in 1 to 2 weeks, it's going to get significantly worse. In 3 to 4 weeks, they say it's going to get really bad. So I think at least some people recognize this, even though ordinary Americans are not being told this, and they're getting worried.
I see many concerns in Iranian people and in Lebanese people because they say somehow that the United States and Israel they're trying to do what they couldn't achieve on the battlefield, because Israel was trying to, as they have in their mind, that they're trying to disarm Hezbollah. That's the main agenda on their part, to defeat Hezbollah. But they couldn't do it on the battlefield. And they were getting hit by Hezbollah forces on the ground.
Hezbollah did very well during the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Extraordinarily well. And this again shows that all those analyses that were saying that Hezbollah is defeated, Hezbollah is no longer, all of that was nonsense. Hezbollah, though it's surrounded, Al Qaeda and ISIS, US proxies, are now in charge in Syria. And then there's this Israeli regime, and then you have US puppets in Beirut. But despite that, what they've done to the Israeli regime during the past few weeks is quite stunning.
And that's why many people are thinking that they want to make a civil war in Lebanon in order to let Hezbollah and the government, and they're fighting each other, and Israel grabbing the southern part of Lebanon. This is the problem, because they have defined a yellow line in the southern part of Lebanon, the same yellow line that they have defined in Gaza. These are not good signs if the government in Lebanon is caring about the sovereignty of Lebanon.
Yes, you're correct, but there are a couple of things that have changed, and that is that we're heading towards a global economic crisis, and Israel is going to be blamed for it. And who controls the Strait of Hormuz? Iran. The balance of power has shifted. The Israeli regime has been forced to accept a ceasefire. Now it has this, and now it's saying that we'll have this yellow line, and then we'll start blowing up buildings and people's homes because they're spiteful creatures. That's like what they do in Gaza. These are monsters. We don't expect anything different. They will snipe kids. They like killing kids. And Western journalists and Western elites have no problem with that. Remember, the Epstein class, look at what they've done to all those little girls. So, the Epstein class, the people who work for the Epstein class, do you expect them to be outraged at what they do to kids in Lebanon and in Gaza? Of course not. These journalists are just agents of empire. They're agents of the oligarchy, this utterly corrupt oligarchy. So, but the balance of power shifted, and we are patient. Remember, the occupation of Lebanon took 18 years. The Israelis occupied Lebanon in 1982. They took the capital, they took Beirut. And Hezbollah was born out of occupation. And in the year 2000, 18 years later, they kicked them out of Lebanon. Israel will not be in Lebanon for 18 years. The world is changing very rapidly, and the axis of resistance is growing, and the axis of resistance is becoming popular across the world. It is stunning. It is stunning how popular the Islamic Republic of Iran and Ayatollah Khamenei and the axis of resistance have become. It's stunning, this sudden shift in world public opinion. They're seeing through the propaganda. They see who supports the Palestinian people and who complicit. So I am not concerned. It saddens me. Every death bothers me. Over the last 2.5 years, I've been very active on, and so have you, so many other people. We've seen so much footage. It's, sometimes there were times at night where I couldn't sleep when Gaza was really bad. I mean, like everyone else, you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to go and check you might check my cell phone, and then you see footage and outrageous acts committed by these creatures. But the tide is turning, and I don't see a scenario where the United States wins. I've never seen, seriously, Nima, I've never seen such a self-confident people as the Iranian people. And when there's talk of war right now, they say, yeah, okay. Again, this they're I keep reminding people that of what General Soleimani said. He said, we're the nation of martyrdom, and we're the nation of Imam Hussein. And truly, you can see this in the Iranian people. And that is basically what has brought about this turning point in the region. So it's not going to be over tomorrow. These creatures will continue to slaughter women and children. But I see this as the era of the demise of Zionism. It'll take a while, but it will happen.
Do you think that it's going to take too much time for have a constructive communication between Iran and GCC countries to have something substantial in the region?
They're going to have to accept the new reality that, first of all, they figured out that the United States doesn't care about them. The United States only cares about Israel. It doesn't care about them at all. It milks them. Iran doesn't want to milk them. Iran is just saying, don't help others bomb our country. It's not any great expectation. I mean, it's not something extraordinary. These regimes, Qatar, the Saudis, the Emiratis, they allowed the Bahrainis and the others, they allowed their territory to be used against Iraq. They allowed their territory to be used against Syria. They allowed their territory to be used against Yemen and against Iran. That's not going to happen anymore. It's up to them if they accept this new reality. If not, I don't think they'll last. I think you'll have new regimes in power, and that would be a good thing if you have actual people in charge of Qatar, the people of Qatar, the people who live there, ordinary people, making the decisions in the Emirates and Bahrain and Kuwait. I think we'd be living in a much more prosperous region and a much more integrated region.
Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you very much, Nima. It's always an honor being on your show.
कश्मीर में अखियां दी ठंड माया कर प्यार उड़ तेर न कंड माया कर प्यार उड़ तेर न कंड माया कश्मीरा ओ कश्मीर वे जन्नत नजारा है माया अखियां दा चन तारा है माया अखियां दा चन तारा कश्मीर दे दरिया बहंदे ने सुन सजना ए की कहंदे ने सुन सजना ए की कहंदे ने कश्मीरा ओ कश्मीर जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर वे मेहंदी दा रंग माया सैर करा दे संग माया सैर करा दे संग माया जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर दे वेखो नजारे नु कर याद वे रोवा प्यारे नु कर याद वे रोवा प्यारे नु जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर वे वागत लार चना रफी दिल को करिए प्यार चना रफी दिल को करिए प्यार
जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर वे अखियां दी ठंड माया कर प्यार उड़ फेर न कंड माया कर प्यार उड़ फेर न कंड माया जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर वे जन्नत नजारा मैया अखियां दा चन तारा मैया अखियां दा चन तारा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर दे दरिया बेंदे ने सुन सजना एक ही कहंदे ने सुन सजना एक ही कहंदे ने जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर दीवे फुल खेलिए मेरा माया हुसन दा बेलिए मेरा माया हुसन दा बेलिए जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा जुल्ला मैया कश्मीरा कश्मीर वे मेहंदी दा रंग माया सैर करा दे संग माया सैर करा दे संग माया
जुल्लामया कश्मीरा जुल्लामया कश्मीरा ओ कश्मीर दे वेखो नजारे नू कर याद वे रो